what a joke. Atsuki, come here.
Kate's voice boomed through the open hatch. Shira and Erina looked at me in search of my reaction. I simply sighed and stood up. I mimicked Kate's actions and climbed down. Upon stepping off the ladder, it didn't take me even half a second to comprehend Kate's shout. Well, this is just great.
Stop messing around. Perhaps the two of them weren't so far off the mark earlier.
With intrigued looks, Shira and Erina peeked through the hatch. From it, they could see the empty room around Kate and me. Is he gone again?
Well, he's not here, so yes.
I rubbed my eyes at Kate's obnoxious voice. Meanwhile, I got closer to the door as he confirmed that Akro wasn't anywhere. The chain is still set. That's strange.
Strange? No, Atsuki, you really screwed up this time.
From Shira's face, I could tell she and I knew word by word the accusation Kate was about to make.
What's strange is what you did earlier. You took the key from Erina, came here and unlocked the door for Akro, then you set the chain.
Why the hell would I do that?
To let him escape, idiot.
Wasn't he the one who decided to come in the first place?
Yes, it appears both of you aren't quite on the bright side. Jesus Christ. If I'm wrong, go ahead and illuminate us. Why did you want the key?
To see if I could retroactively open the door.
You think you're smart, don't you? You have gone too far. It seems that Atsuki, Akro, and Sai were working together the whole time. Shiryu, are you part of the group too?
Instead of answering, she came down, followed by Erina. She looked around, but Akro wasn't anywhere. He'd disappeared without leaving a trace, as if he'd been an illusion from the start. At the same time, I couldn't blame Kate that much for suspecting me, since I understood how questionable my actions must have looked.
Anyway, this is more than enough. I'm leaving. Well, he said we're leaving, actually.
He can't decide that for us, but alright.
Atsuki, this time, that camera clearly recorded your actions when you let Akro escape. Don't think this will go unpunished.
Oh shit, how could I forget about it? I had to stop taking him seriously, as that would eventually drive me insane. He pushed me aside, unset the chain, and tried to open the door, but only met with failure.
Alright, Erina, we've tried your suggestion, but it's not going to work if half of us have different intentions. We need to go find Akro and Sai. We can't even trust these two kids.
I didn't feel like giving my input, so I remained quiet. So did Erina, who looked down uncertainly.
Enough already.
Remembering the pocket in which she'd hidden the key, Kate suddenly reached inside and retrieved it at the cost of startling her. Without reacting further, she stayed immobile, watching him insert the key into the door. With abrupt and stiff motions, he turned it and dragged the door open. Without looking back, he walked away. He opted not to lock us inside and kept the door as it was. None of us said anything or looked at each other. Instead, against my own expectations, Erina walked forward and exited the room too. Then Shira and I exchanged looks. She gave me a bitter smile that I replied to with a long sigh. I estimated it must have been around 1620, meaning that less than 5 hours remained until our scheduled freedom. We stayed still for a few seconds, contemplating the open door in front of us that symbolized our utter failure to keep everyone in one place. I'm guessing you wanted to try to see if Akro and Sai could have escaped alone. Yeah, didn't work though. I figured. Maybe we really missed a hidden person then. Maybe. I shrugged lightly. I didn't know how else to approach their disappearance. Well, do you want to stay here? I'm not sure. First we should fix that. She pointed at the handleless door. The handle should have still been under the bed of the other bedroom. Right, we shouldn't keep them detached. After more than an hour, I stepped out of the room and viewed the scenery of the attic again. Then I entered the other bedroom and kneeled to see that both handles were still here, or there. With the same screwdriver as before, I put them in place. I turned both to test that they worked properly, and I removed the key that Kate had left in the inner keyhole. Finally, I put it back in the drawers where we'd found it, along with the screwdriver. Remember this? From my pocket, I took out the key to Naomi's locker. Oh, you still had it? Yeah, I used the cabinet key to hide it, which Akro and Sai must have left with later. I think so, if they needed to use the Sekimeiya. That might have been why Akro was in such an odd state. Most likely, if he wasn't lying. We could have been lucky the times we traveled since nothing happened to us. Maybe Akro and Isla suffered from a side effect. Like before, Shiraya went quiet at the mention of Isla. It had already been quite a while since we'd learned about her fate. By the way, is it me or is the smell from earlier back? Yes, now that you mention it, it's very similar to the one all around the crystal floor. I can't tell where it's coming from, and it's not easy to perceive. I moved around to see if getting closer to the source would be noticeable, but I felt no change. I spent a while going over the way Akira and Sai could have escaped, but I focused on the fact that the key had been left in the outer keyhole. However, even though Akira escaped again, the chain was left intact. I know. I think we should go down to see what happened with the Sekimeiya. We could come across the person who opened the door for Akira and Sai too. Alright. We hadn't inspected Akira after he'd come back, so it was possible he'd had a key on him. Despite that, he couldn't have left the chain set when he exited. We took timid steps out of the bedroom, as if an invisible net was still pulling us in. Once we were in the hallway, the first thing I did was enter the kitchen. It's been so long since I drank anything. I bet you're thirsty too. We should have anticipated it. Yeah, I tried to drink water when I went to the bathroom, but it wasn't very good. I opened a cabinet to grab a glass. Tap water wasn't my preference at all, but it would suffice. I turned the valve, filled up the glass, and quickly took a sip. Oh, what the? You're right, no way this is drinkable. I grimaced at the taste. Not much water had flowed out of the tap, but although it was pretty transparent, it wasn't something I could drink. It had slightly alleviated the dryness, at least. I left the glass on the countertop and went to inspect one of the many things we had to check, the living room's floor. Look at this. I can see different pairs of footprints going between the entrance and the hallway, and there are many more under them that have deteriorated a lot. It's too hard to conclude anything from them, though. Erina and Kate had just left, so 2 of the pairs might have belonged to them. As I looked at the footprints more, I realized that at least 3 different pairs were distinguishable. One set was fairly small, another was medium-sized, and the last was the biggest. In addition, the smaller ones were older. Are these islas? They can't be, right? And I think they're a bit too big. Wait, look, the elevator's door is shut. I walked back to the hallway and saw that the elevator was back in operation. After the many hours it had spent stuck in the attic, someone had chosen to re-enable it. I wondered if Erina or Kate had done it. What it meant was that the footprints wouldn't reveal the exact number of people who'd entered or exited the attic. We wanted to understand what had gone on while we'd stayed in the bedroom, so we chose to walk down the floor. Why would you not open the elevator door again to make it unusable? The attic key was still in the door. The vast and desolate sight of the sick floor, which contrasted the comfort of the attic, was a stark reminder of how things had progressed since the morning. We should find Sai. He has to be somewhere, and he could know what happened to Akira. I'm not sure he'll willingly talk to us after what he did. If he's still around, though, we'll find him. The same applied to Akira, and there was a possibility one last person was to be found. Had Erina imagined her dead daughter's yells, or had there been some truth behind them? After everything we'd fought, we couldn't fully rule out a living Isla being present around us. We monotonously circled down the floors like we'd done many times. We didn't waste time looking through the partitions, as making it to the crystal floor was our priority. Although using the elevator would have been expedient, we wanted to stretch our legs and at least give a cursory glance through the drab center of the tower. After moving down 3 floors, an unexpected sound interrupted the overwhelming silence. It was the elevator moving through floor 4. There it is again. We were in front of the elevator, but the opaque door didn't reveal any information. I wish the button would light up when the elevator's moving. I doubt Erina and Kate would have used it already, no matter the reason. I'd say it was probably someone else. We hadn't tried to open its door in the attic, so we couldn't know the direction it had been moving forward. However, it was likely it had been used to move from one extreme of the building to the other. We would have gone back up if we'd known that the elevator hadn't been in the attic, as it would have guaranteed that it had been moving up. Instead, it took us a few seconds to circle the outer corridors until we were by the staircase leading to floor 2. There the sound repeated, but it was much harder to notice. Again? It's only been a few seconds, so the first time someone must have called it. You're right, yeah. So either someone called it from under us and they just went up, or the opposite. I wouldn't think we missed someone above us, so I'd say the elevator was going up this last time. If we were about to find an empty crystal floor, we'd go up again. Since the attic key hadn't been removed from the door, unless the elevator had been called from the attic, it could have only reached floor 6. Of course, assuming another key hadn't been used, but it wasn't likely one existed. Knowing that it still could have been going down, we continued heading toward the crystal floor. Shortly, we were in front of the stairs that led to that dark place where everything had started. There was no revealing sight that immediately met our eyes. The floor spread out in front of us exactly as we remembered it. In hallway A, the light had begun to find a path through the dark barrier and bounced off the walls more than it had the last time I'd been there. The strange smell hadn't faded since we'd been in the attic, and it had started to seem like a natural scent of the tower. It wasn't unpleasant, only intriguing, as I couldn't associate it to anything I'd ever smelled, and we couldn't identify its source. Let's see. At our left was the elevator. I approached it and grabbed its handle. With little force, I attempted to open it, and there was unexpectedly no resistance. The door moved, uncovering an empty elevator and my mistaken assumption. It was going down? Was there someone above us who we didn't see? If so, they must be here now. That had left me more confused than I'd anticipated. While it was possible that someone had gone up and down from the crystal floor, or that they'd sent an empty elevator down upon arriving in the attic, Shiria's claim was the most probable one. However, if we'd already missed someone on the upper floors, they'd probably stayed away from us intentionally, so using the elevator to reveal their existence was a little strange. I moved aside, trying not to obsess over it yet. Before any of that, we should check if the Sekimeiya we left in the cabinet is still there. Yeah, but I wouldn't bet on it. It's gonna be there. We stepped into hallway A. The cabinet key had been taken by Akira and Sai, so no part of me expected to find a shiny egg behind a curtain. We entered the event room and I approached the cabinet to see if my expectations would be betrayed twice in a row. It's not there, right? No. Okay. I can't wait to find Sai and hear the excuses he'll come up with. Before I let the curtain fall, I tried to scroll the glass open and it moved along with my fingers easily. The cabinet was definitely unlocked with the key, so there's no way the Sekimeiya teleported itself out. Isn't that still a little strange? What is? That they didn't lock it again. Maybe it's not, since it's obvious that Akira and Sai did it, but I thought they would have done that to not give away so easily that the key they'd grabbed had been used. I'm not sure. They could have been in a hurry, but they must have known they'd be suspected regardless. However, the glass had been shut, not showing any signs of a hurry, and despite that the cabinet hadn't been locked, which could also have been done manually. It was possible that there was more to Shiria's input, but we had no way to be sure. Earlier, I thought that they were maybe taking the Sekimeiya out so that the cold wouldn't affect it. If that was the case, I'm pretty sure they would have locked the cabinet to prevent us from putting it back if we found it. There are other cabinets with temperature functions, but I think you're right. I'm sure they could have taken care of the others in different ways too. I suppose it's time to check our Sekimeiya. Nobody could have taken it, but it might have started working. You want to activate it? I don't know. It might be dangerous, but nothing happened to us the other times. It sounds very reckless, but it can take us to the past. If it started working at some point, we might be able to go quite a few hours back. If that happens, we won't appear in the tower, because there's no way we missed ourselves from the beginning. It could put us outside instantly. Technically, we could have been in the secret partition of the storeroom. You're right though, it could take us out. Seeing it like that, it was a lucky chance. Did the Sekimeiya have the power to kill us, erase our memories, and free us from the tower? Could it even let us see Mia again? I hadn't made up my mind. If we had the chance, activating it would always be tempting, as it could let us understand its mechanics and what had been going on. Undecided, we exited through hallway B. Directly at our left was the staff room, housing our own Sekimeiya. We couldn't feel the presence of anyone else, so we entered it. Remembering which locker belonged to Naomi, I stepped toward it while Shiria stayed by the door to alert me of any sound. I took the key out of my pocket and inserted it into the keyhole. With 2 fingers, I turned it to undo the lock. The sharp sound told me that I'd been successful. Lastly, I removed the key, which opened the metallic door at the same time. I saw the narrow interior with the coat hanging as we left it. Then I raised my line of sight to reach the higher compartment. It wasn't storing anything. Its interior contained nothing but an empty space waiting to be filled. My dumbfounded look persisted until the realization fully sank in. Hey, this is the right locker, isn't it? We left it up here. Yes, is it not there? Look, there's nothing. She approached me with a neutral face. Not a slight hint of surprise emanated from her. By that point, something truly impressive would need to occur to evoke genuine shock from us. We felt like we'd seen it all. We definitely left it here. Was it still locked? Yes. We let out exasperated sighs. We had kept the Sekimeiya hidden so that nobody else would find it, but it seemed it had decided to spite us and disappear. Even though it hadn't made us travel before we left it, it evidently did have powers, as nobody should have been able to take it out. Did it teleport like Sai's been saying? Well, he and Akro couldn't have taken it. If it did, we might know when. We've never seen two Sekimeiya exist at the same time, but it should have happened at some point when one supposedly appeared in Sai's hip pack, right? I nodded, unsure. Even though two Sekimeiya might have existed at that point, they had to be the same one, and one had traveled from the future. Sai told you that he didn't know he had it and that he'd never put it there. He could have been telling the truth. At that point, another Sekimeiya existed inside a cabinet in room B3, and we used it to travel to the past. If it can randomly teleport itself, it could be traveling to the past as well. After all, when we came back to that room, the Sekimeiya in the cabinet had disappeared after the point I'd seen it grey. Right, but we thought Sai had taken it. It could have traveled to the past to Sai's hip pack. I get Sai's own existence is another mystery, though. After that, he hid it in the cleaning room. Next, we hid it in this locker, but at some point the same thing happened. It teleported to the hallway A cabinet with Isla. This time, it didn't even have to have teleported to the past, it could have simply teleported. Then, since we brought it to the event room, Akro and Sai could have taken it with the key. This could also explain how at the start it appeared in the storeroom. I spent a few seconds in thought. So, is it disappearing randomly? There are a couple of things I'm not sure about. Even though it could have teleported to the storeroom, the cabinet in the event room had been unlocked, implying that one of us had moved it. I suppose it's possible someone hid it in hallway B and it teleported to the storeroom, but that's hard to believe. And there's one unexplained thing I can think of. The first time Isla disappeared from the cabinet before appearing again. Nothing was found inside it, so the Sekimeiya couldn't have teleported from this locker yet. Oh, something else is needed to explain that, yeah. I guess the Sekimeiya could have traveled from the locker to another place. Kate activated it and then it traveled again, to the cabinet with Isla. That's one way to put it together. I think everything holds up. Anyway, if the Sekimeiya was actually taken from here by someone, it's very possible they put it inside Isla's cabinet. Honestly, it feels a bit strange to think that it's been teleporting itself through time at random intervals. Well, how else could it have disappeared from here? There's no way this lock was picked, right? After thinking about it, I spotted a couple of alternative paths to take. The door was still locked, so I highly doubt the lock was picked and then set again. Only one thing would have been needed to get the Sekimeiya out of here, if it never disappeared all by itself: the key. Duplication can be easily achieved by traveling to the past, since two versions of yourself exist at the same time. I'm still not sure about everything you can do with it, but it can work with objects as we're also replicating our clothes after traveling. I don't believe that ever happened to this key, but it's not out of the question. Since the time we found the first Naomi up to this point, it never traveled through time. Before that point though, we don't know. While the mystery of the second Naomi is as unsolved as ever, she didn't have any keys on her, which makes me think that her keyring wasn't replicated alongside her body and clothes. But that's not necessarily the truth. The main reason why I think that is because of the initial footprints in the attic and because her keys weren't removed the first time. There could have been a reason for that though, and the culprit might have had a replica of Naomi's keyring from the start. It's even possible an entirely different culprit killed the second Naomi and grabbed her keys. It would have hidden them somewhere, so after how much we've searched, it's impressive if we still haven't found them. Since we searched everyone before locking ourselves up in the attic, it can't be that someone still had the 4 keys from the second Naomi at that point. While it's possible, I don't think another key like this one exists. I'm inclined to believe that the second Naomi never had any keys on her. Yeah, so nobody could have opened a locker. No, we could have. We have the keys, so we could go back to the past and unlock it. Oh, yeah, I guess so. But this can't be it. I spent a while thinking about these kinds of loops, and even though they seem possible, I find it hard to accept them. If we go back to the past and get the Sekimeiya out of this locker, would the origin be that way, Would the origin be that we realized it had happened? Would we be choosing to explain this mystery in our way? Even if we do go back to the past and get it out because we realize that otherwise Sai or Akira will do it, the fundamental reason would still be that we've witnessed the end result already. On the surface it sounds possible, but I don't believe it is. Shiraya kept looking at me with a strange face. Perhaps listening to me toss out those words sounded bizarre, as we'd never had conversations remotely similar to that. You're still saying that there's no other possibility, right? No, I'm saying that right now there's likely only one. Someone else will grab this key, go back to the past, and use it to unlock the locker. Huh. Such an abrupt response made me laugh. I might have been deluding myself a little, but I thought I'd reached that conclusion through semi-logical reasoning. I shook some thoughts away and closed the locker without locking it. Then I left the room and told Shiraya to follow me. I entered the woman's bathroom and waited for her to come. While she looked at me quizzically, I opened the toilet's lid, dropped the key inside, and flushed it. There it goes. What are you doing? Yeah, it seems I was wrong. Perhaps I'm taking myself too seriously. The universe didn't break, and I doubt the past changed. My theory involved someone else using the key to go back to the past and taking our Sekimeiya, so this was an easy way to deny that reality. It appears the answer was another one though, meaning that the Sekimeiya vanished differently. It could be teleporting itself. Maybe it's just becoming invisible. He's not entertaining your theory. We went back to the staff room. If, against all odds, my actions had changed the past without breaking the universe or altering our memories, the locker would be locked and we'd have no way of getting the Sekimeiya out. I stepped inside and tried to open it. I had left it unlocked, so it opened. Once again, the winter coat was the only thing inside. I brushed my hand through the higher compartment just to make sure that it wasn't actually going invisible or anything. I shrugged and closed the locker, unable to lock it anymore. Still nothing? Well, Sai seems like a bottom feeder, so maybe you flushed the key into his home. Alright. Where did that come from? I exited the room without revealing that I'd been about to consider something similar. I smiled slightly to myself and looked around the hallway. I guess we should try to find the others. We have to be close to someone. Yeah, let's see who we come across. After the longest time, we put into action the usual procedure. We began with the cleaning room at our side. Next was the crystal room B6 found on the opposite side. Atsuki, the Sekimeiya's on the floor. I'd been about to move to the next room when Shiria's casual voice stopped me in place. I turned around slowly to see her nodding at my disbelief. I approached the door and looked through it. In front of a cabinet was the Sekimeiya, lying on the floor and glowing white. Once again, Shiria had found it as soon as we'd started the search. That's sudden. Who would have left it there? Nobody. I bet someone activated it, disappeared, and didn't come back. I thought of Akro's case. If he'd forgotten having traveled from that room, he wouldn't have come back. Similarly, if someone had traveled and appeared outside the tower, the Sekimeiya would have stayed there. We walked up to it with guarded stances. The site was very reminiscent of an obvious trap with a lure, so we'd instinctively scanned the empty room before stepping in. I kneeled, hid my right hand under my sleeve, and stood back up holding the Sekimeiya. It's definitely working. It burns. What do we do with it? I couldn't hold it for very long due to the heat increasing rapidly through my shirt. I started to walk toward the door as I thought about it. Either we use it or we leave it in its cabinet. There's no point in hiding it again if we're not going to ever activate it. It might have been dangerous, but greed and curiosity were powerful. In my hands, I had the key to every mystery. I thought we had given up on understanding it, but if we figured out how to use a time travel device before it was exposed to the world, it was undeniable that the options could be endless. Given what happened while we were in the attic, it seems likely that whoever took the Sekimeiya was the main culprit behind everything. Despite that, they simply left it here, probably after using it. They haven't come back for it, so that could be a hint to their goal or their failure. Regardless, it was probably activated recently, so we shouldn't go too far back. Just enough to understand what went down while we were in the attic. Also, I don't think it's as hot as it was in the past, so depending on how far we go, we could confirm that correlation. Alright, let's see what happens. She moved closer to me, implying that she wanted to be in the range too. It might have been a horribly bad idea, but the Sekimeiya's existence felt like nothing short of a miracle that otherwise we'd regret not taking advantage of. It could have been about to doom the entire world, but during those 12 hours we had it all to ourselves, and a race to understand it might have been happening behind the scenes. We hadn't inspected the whole building yet, so the possibility of having traveled to the recent past was open. I took my left hand out of my sleeve and brought it toward the Sekimeiya with intentions of further figuring out its mechanics, limits, and what had occurred outside of the bedroom walls. As soon as I felt the direct heat on my fingers, I saw a door. I'm back here. Wait, the handle is attached. I heard a sound coming from behind me. As I turned around, I saw Shiria climbing down the ladder. Did you just appear there? Yeah, we traveled from room B6, right? Yes, and look, there's the handle. Either we went more than an hour and a half into the past, or just a few minutes. Shiria and I slowly scanned the place we traveled to, but we didn't spot anything else noteworthy. We'd appeared in the bedroom where we'd just been. You said it didn't feel as hot as the previous times, so probably the latter. She was right, meaning that we weren't going to see what had happened while we'd been locked up. However, every single traveler revealed plentiful facts to analyze. Comparing them with earlier travels felt like the best way to get to conclusions. This is my 4th travel, and again nothing bad has directly come out of it. I don't know what happened to Isla and Akro, but I doubt the mere act of traveling is bringing any danger. Regarding my memories, I summarized the basic events in case there was a glaring contradiction she could find. Yeah, that's all that happened. Unless traveling affected our memories in the same way, there's nothing wrong with what you said. I'm starting to think more and more that Akro lied to us. He reacted to the mention of the Sekimeiya, but that could have been intentional, to relate his memory loss to it and make it more believable. I feel that Kate was right and he was trying to prevent us from leaving. After his job was done, he must have escaped somehow. How though? I don't know, but I cannot come up with a little idea. We had the key and the chain was left set. That makes it likely that he teleported out. I thought that perhaps Sai did that. Maybe he traveled next to the door to encompass Akro and make him escape, since neither of them could open the door. It could be that he made us go to the upper bedroom so that we wouldn't travel with him. I don't know why they'd do any of that, but there's not much else I can think of. Actually no, Akro could have escaped all by himself and left the chain set. Maybe he suddenly disappeared from the room traveling to the past. Then in the past he activated the Sekimeiya to encompass the bed on which he was sitting. It wasn't necessary for Sai to do that as long as Akro had thought of it. That must have happened before someone traveled from room B6 then. We walked out. When I looked at the living room, I instantly recognized our own footprints. These are definitely ours and they're very recent. We went a few minutes to the past. Someone must have used Sekimeiya very shortly before us. We can't see what happened, but we can be pretty sure of that. And if Akro never actually escaped the way I said, it's possible they went very far into the past. We spent a long time in the bedroom, so there was a lot of time for the Sekimeiya to store. You know, this could have been what Akro and Sai worked together to accomplish. The store time was originally Sai's idea. Akro's job could have been to keep us from exiting the bedroom, letting the Sekimeiya store time for a while. Once they'd waited the required amount, they activated it and went far enough into the past to exit the tower. Since the Sekimeiya was left on the floor, it's possible they aren't here anymore. And they couldn't simply have waited more before escaping the bedroom because the Sekimeiya was in the cold. There's still the disappearing Sekimeiya in the locker to explain, but that would be the only thing. Yeah. Sai seemed to be having fun, so exiting the tower doesn't seem like something he'd want to do. However, they did this right after discovering the storeroom's secret exit. I believe that as soon as they saw that, they realized they could go back many hours in time and find the door from the outside, and try to enter and exit with the Sekimeiya. They might be about to attempt to return, since doing it earlier would have made their own travel impossible. Let's go down and keep an eye on the Sekimeiya. It's a bit hard to believe that everyone's goal isn't to escape with it. I nodded. Shiria rushed to the elevator and called it after seeing that the door wouldn't open. Huh, this happened again. What? The elevator, remember? We were the ones to call it, it seems. This also happened at the beginning during my first travel. Oh, I didn't even think about it. It's coming up, meaning that it was below us when we heard it on the office floors. We're going to the crystal floor where we saw it had arrived. According to her, she'd called it without realizing that she'd been about to cause the noise we'd already heard. The belief that every event had an origin point was reinforced once more, as she'd unconsciously reenacted the past. Us hearing the elevator had derived into traveling to the past, but the action of calling the elevator had an organic origin. Not only that, but we'd covered the single sign of life we'd experienced, so we had to seriously wonder what happened to Sai, Akro, Erina, and Kate. When the button lit up, she opened the door and we boarded the elevator. Without a second thought, she pressed the floor 1 button. While it started to move down, we once again experienced the claustrophobic atmosphere that the dim light and opaque doors effortlessly created. We soon passed floor 3, where our past selves must have found themselves wondering who was inside the elevator and where it was headed. We weren't in a big hurry, but we knew that we would soon appear on the crystal floor from the stairs. I thought of what to do to escape our past field of vision. We entered the event room from hallway A, and after seeing the empty cabinet, we looked inside Naomi's locker. We should go to the lobby where we won't be seen. It sounded like the best idea, so we moved there and closed the hallway A door behind us. Even though there wasn't much to be tense about, we felt safe staying there, and we began to mindlessly move toward the metal shutter. Remember what I thought the time you appeared in the living room? It seemed as if we'd appeared where we'd been in the midpoint of the time traveled. Yes, and this time something similar happened. I noticed it too. I think it might have been the opposite. You appeared in the lower level of the bedroom, and I was upstairs next to the hatch. Those exact positions occurred before we unlocked the bedroom. Right. I followed Kate down, you peeked from the hatch when I was already below. That might have been the location. And that probably happened a bit more than 10 minutes before we touched the Sekimeiya. Then we discussed whether to leave, placed the handles on the back on the door, walked down to the crystal floor and talked about the Sekimeiya vanishing. We appeared in the bedroom before the time we'd heard the elevator. We might have appeared where we'd been 10 minutes prior to traveling, while only having gone back 5. It's the opposite of what I thought regarding the last travel. It swapped the 2 points, although I'm not sure if the times fit that well. That could be it, but it's still not consistent with any of the past travels. If there aren't set rules, there's no point in trying to understand how the Sekimeiya works. However, what's most important is that once again a past position was used to determine where we appeared, even if it was done differently. We heard an indistinct sound coming from hallway A made by a door. That's us, we just entered the event room. We waited, and seconds later the same sound came from hallway B. Unmistakably, a closing door had created it. Now we're in the staff room, we'll travel very soon. We thought we only had to wait until Shiria became aware of one thing we'd missed. Hey, look at the floor there, isn't that blood? What? She was pointing at a spot next to the hallway A door. From afar I could see a tiny red spot close to the cleaning bucket. Here is that on my monitor. I think it was on my monitor. Never mind. I can't see any blood. Shira's interpretation proved to be right. A single drop of blood existed on the spacious floor of the lobby. It's definitely blood. Is that on my monitor? Yeah, that's on my monitor again. I still can't see it. The contrast with the shiny white floor was immense. I looked around the entire room, but the drop Shira had found was the only one I could see. Fortunately, it was enough to tell us something very important. It's almost dry. It must have been here for a little while. From when we were locked up in the attic, blood dripped off someone. Akira didn't look injured when he came back, but that doesn't mean much. Isn't it strange that it was left here? If someone was in a hurry or being chased by an attacker, they wouldn't have cleaned it, but I feel like the culprit would have, right? Perhaps it's not evidence worth cleaning up, but it tells us that something happened. Blood can never be a good sign. I feel like this is a place where evidence would be removed from, since it doesn't have security cameras. I stared at the single drop of blood. Something about it was intriguing. While it wasn't a puddle, it was fairly wide. It wasn't a single drop that would come out of an innocuous scratch. Despite that, there was only one mark. Since any wound that produced a drop of that size would keep bleeding, it was likely it had been covered to prevent further blood loss. Eren and Kate must be somewhere, but they can't have anything to do with this. Even though Akari didn't appear injured, it's possible he dripped blood before traveling to the past, which could have undone a recent injury. After saying that, a thought came to me. Is the Sekimeiya reconstructing our past bodies? We'd asked ourselves that question many times before, and I'd found a way to answer it. Abruptly, I put my hand in my right pocket and felt something. I took it out and showed it to Shiria. Ah, that's for Naomi's locker. Did you appear with it after traveling? I must have. I flushed it away before touching the Sekimeiya, but since I had it when we were in the bedroom, I appeared with it in my pocket. Like we suspected, the Sekimeiya has been replicating our past bodies exactly as they were in the past. In the bedroom, I appeared facing the door. Even the position of my body matched, and yours must have too. Since at that point the key was under my possession, it was also on the body I appeared in. Again, That's why the cleaning cart didn't appear anywhere in the past. What's more likely is that it ceased existing as soon as you traveled touching it. I see. Yeah, that must be how it works. I closed my eyes. It was very likely we concluded something regarding the Sekimeiya's travels, but at first glance, it didn't seem too important. I had even thought of it before without giving it much importance. However, we could almost be certain that the Sekimeiya replicated our past bodies exactly as they'd once been. As soon as I tried to explore that concept, something major came to me. It was proof that small details could open seemingly sealed doors and that we had to explore every little path. Escaping alive had been the main goal at the start. Then, escaping with a time travel device had begun to sound like an achievable goal that some of us might have shared. However, Shiri and I had internally sought an unreachable peak while we'd been taunted by such inconsequential time travel. That was saving our friend who died 2 weeks earlier. Even though it had appeared impossible regardless of the approach, concluding that last detail might have opened the first real path to it, no matter how vague or improbable. If we could understand what determined the exact amount of time to be traveled, and most importantly, the appearing location. If there had been a time in which I'd been touching Mia and I could replicate that body, the possibility that Mia would appear with me might have been real. While it didn't sound all that special, the locker key had just been brought back into existence. I'd flushed it away through the toilet and I'd managed to get it back with the Sekimeiya. Mia's circumstances were the same, with the sole difference that she was a human being. My past body and my possessions of the past could be replicated, but Mia might not have counted if I'd simply been touching her. But what if I could think of a time where I'd been holding her hand or her shirt? None immediately came to mind, but they might have applied. I looked at Shirya, whose pensive look must have resembled mine. We'd remained silent for many seconds, and while I hadn't thought of voicing my recent thoughts to her, she might have found that same path herself. I took a couple steps back to lean on the column, trying to break through the single wall that blocked my reasoning. With the sole difference that she is a human being. I might have been too fast to think that. While I thought that we couldn't rule this out without attempting it, I see a big problem that might just reveal its impossibility. The biggest difference between a key and a human being is without a doubt the possession of consciousness. In the bedroom, our past bodies were recreated and we appeared within them. The locker key is proof enough of that. However, what happened to the brain? If our past bodies were recreated, the brain must have belonged to a past version of us, despite that we possessed memories and knowledge obtained after the recreated point. So even though we appeared in bodies identical to our pasts, the past minds were left out. Why did our consciousness appear in our past bodies without conflicting with our past consciousnesses? That has to be because we touched the Sekimeiya while in possession of a future consciousness. Then it was put within a past version of us, one that had a vacant mind. So what would happen if I could replicate my body from a time I'd been holding Mia? My consciousness would make it to the replicated body, but since Mia's wouldn't travel with the Sekimeiya, there'd be none to insert into hers. Therefore it's possible I'd appear next to a lifeless body, as past consciousnesses aren't being replicated. Ooh, might that be what happened with Isla? But I can't know whether I'm overwriting my past consciousness every time I replicate my body, or if it's merely not being replicated and I'm occupying an empty spot. After all, the Sekimeiya touched Isla's dead body and she didn't travel. That's probably because there was no longer a consciousness present within her. To try to make this happen and test which hypothesis is correct, attaching ourselves to the smallest possibility, we'd have to understand the Sekimeiya completely. Then the attempt would have to be final and about Mia. Shiri and I can't arrange the necessary circumstances by ourselves to see if it could ever work, because a successful result would create an extra and permanent version of one of us. So, the first step, what determines the point in time our replicated bodies are based on? It's definitely different from the amount of time traveled, and it doesn't seem to be consistent. But the second step, the amount of distance traveled, appears to work under a consistent rule. The longer the Sekimeiya spends storing energy, the further we will travel. Meanwhile, the replicated location has differed with each travel, and there's no clear rule to draw. Nonetheless, it's hard to think only one thing would be consistent. The core of replicating a past location is purely teleportation. We're teleporting to a coordinate of space we were once at. However, how is the Sekimeiya working with that coordinates? While the answer could be that its powers are simply magical, there's more depth to it than I first thought. The easiest concept of teleportation to grasp consists of two containers and matter teleporting from one to the other. Teleportation point is the other container because it exists and can be accessed. We aren't appearing inside designated and fixed containers. So let's assume that the coordinate of the bedroom where I appeared can be measured with a number. When I touched the Sekimeiya, it sent me to that space coordinate after recognizing that I found myself there in the past. The problem is that we live on Earth, a planet that is constantly moving. As time went forward, Earth would have moved away from that coordinate, and it wouldn't have corresponded to the attic's bedroom anymore. If the Sekimeiya had simply sent me to one of my past coordinates, chances are I would have appeared in the middle of space. Going off Shira's estimate, we appeared where we'd been 10 minutes prior to traveling while having only gone back 5. At that point, the coordinate that had once belonged to the attic's bedroom had already been vacated by Earth. I'd been walking in circles around the column, absorbed in my unusual thoughts. Shira saw that I'd stopped and stretched her body a bit. Should we go? It's well past the time we traveled. Yes, but I want to do one thing first. I showed her the locker key, then we left through hallway B. It became evident we'd left the doors of 2 rooms open, the event room and room B6. I ignored them and walked to the bathrooms. Like before, I raised the toilet's lid and tossed the key inside before flushing it away. I had to do it again after I turned to deny once more the reality in which someone uses it in the past to take our Sekimeiya. Well, the universe handled it fine again. The way the Sekimeiya disappeared from the locker is still basically a locked room mystery. She shrugged, and while she was right, I still went to the staff room. I was able to open the locker just fine, and there was no Sekimeiya inside. Nobody else ever held that key, right? Could someone go back in time and replicate a position in which they'd held it? Only when Sai found the whole set on the first Naomi, I'm pretty sure. My mind had gone pretty deep into it. What if someone replicated a position in which they'd been holding me? Had that ever happened? If that would create a lifeless body of mine, it could appear holding the key. Let's get the Sekimeiya. It still has to be in the other room. Across the hallway was the crystal room we traveled from. We pushed the door farther and peered into the empty space. We lowered our view and scanned the shining floor. With puzzled faces, we stepped in to access better angles after having been unable to spot the Sekimeiya. It's not here. That didn't make any sense. Had someone taken it while we'd been in the lobby? When we traveled, it would have fallen to the floor. Could it have rolled somewhere? I looked all around me and shook my head. Then I continued circling the room with my eyes until I noticed an oddity. A few cabinets were composed of drawers instead of having a hollow interior compartment. One of the drawers was sticking out more than the others. I walked to it, unsure if it was anything important. When Shiria saw what I was staring at, she also realized what was off. Upon closer examination, even though the difference was minimal, my observation was proven correct. The lowest drawer of a cabinet wasn't fully closed. Before I could reach it, Shiria spoke about a detail I'd missed. This is the cabinet the Sekimeiya was next to, right? Oh, earlier? You're right, it was on the floor in front of it. Which meant that most likely the person who had left the Sekimeiya behind had opened the drawer. I extended my arm and pulled the drawer toward me. Immediately an object within rolled around the narrow interior, making dry noises as it hit the wood. After it stopped rolling, the immobile Sekimeiya met our eyes, letting out a surrounding faint glow. Aside from it, there was nothing else inside. Shiri and I looked at each other, well aware that what we were seeing didn't make sense. The Sekimeiya had disappeared only to reappear inside a nearby drawer. Is it even the same one? The drawer wasn't shut all the way, so we can probably ignore the self-teleportation we've been thinking of. Someone most likely put it here. But who would have failed to properly close a drawer? Kate would have. Once again, it seemed as if we'd been lured to the Sekimeiya's whereabouts. Before questioning anything else, I put my shirt between my hand and the Sekimeiya's surface as I'd been trained to do. However, I couldn't last more than a couple seconds before I had to take my hand off. What the fuck, it's burning! If you're right, that must mean that it's been here for a while. The longer the Sekimeiya spends out of the cold temperature, the hotter it gets. The farther back in time you go and the bigger the range is. If that was correct, she must have been right. I'm pretty sure it wasn't this hot during previous travels. It was an imposing claim. Every time we'd found the Sekimeiya, the decision of whether to touch it had been quick to arrive. If the proposition was to go substantially back through time, though, I'd become highly indecisive, as it would make our presence in the tower hard to accomplish, and we would still not be able to change the past. Let's put it in the cabinet. I looked at Shiryu and was met with a bitter expression. She'd already made up her mind. Perhaps touching it would have brought us out of the tower, but it could have also considerably dragged out our stay while we'd be unable to have any impact on a history that had already occurred. I nodded and began thinking about how to move it without burning myself. I think we should just stop altogether. Let's just wait until we can leave. We can travel through time, which is still ridiculous to think about, but there's no point to it, right? It can only help us understand what's going on. There are cameras all over the place, and the police might be a few hours away from entering. We don't even know how the Sekimeiya got inside the drawer, and it's clear that we don't understand anything about what we got caught up in. Touching it again could just be dangerous, so there's no point in risking it again. I tacitly, I don't know, listened to her giving multiple reasons not to touch it. It left me a bit confused, as she hadn't been opposed to it mere minutes ago. I'm sure you can imagine that I've been thinking about how we could undo what happened, but it's not possible. The more time I spend thinking about it, the further I am from being able to let the wound heal. I don't think having some hope is bad, but it is if we know that it doesn't really exist. The Sekimeiya is useless. I was left dumbfounded by those harsh words, and I found myself trying to think about a reply before realizing that I agreed with her. I'd been going on about Isla's decided fate while I'd kept trying to find a way to reverse Mia's. In reality, both were just as impossible to change. I recalled the pensive face Shiryu had been making in the lobby where she must have reached that ultimate conclusion. We said we'd go to Iron after we get out to see what's become of the cabin. Let's make sure that happens. As I felt a breaking wave of emotions, I managed to give her a nod. I'd let her desire to escape become a background goal, while it should have been the only thing to strive for. It had been sudden, but after all those dreamlike hours, Shiryu's words had brought me back to reality. Mia's death was irreversible. I breathed deeply, trying to keep myself balanced. Alright, I agree. Let's wait patiently and ignore whatever the hell the others are doing. At 2100, the front door has to open. Right, what's going on here has nothing to do with us, and it's gotten too big to try to understand. You said Acro and Sai could enter from the outside to grab the Sekimeiya, so let's leave it in the cabinet and wait next to it. I grabbed the bottom of my shirt with my left hand to create a little hammock where I placed the Sekimeiya. As the cloth wasn't touching my skin, I was able to transport the Sekimeiya safely. I quickly headed toward the door and we left the room. We were in hallway B. My perspective on the recording had been fluctuating drastically, and once again it had become one of the worst possibilities. If it occurred, even though it would mean that Isla would be alive in the future, that was only the illusion of an upside. She'd end up going to the past to die inside the room A5 cabinet. I took short steps so that the Sekimeiya would stay still. Eventually I reached the open door that led to the event room, where we would again attempt a wait, detaching ourselves from my surroundings. Oh, why are you giving me a choice? Oh, why, game, why are you doing this?